die begin van die Suid-Afrikaanse betrokkenheid in Suid-Afrika, Namibië. Daar word algemeen aanvaar dat die Suid-Afrikaanse weermag meer as 600.000 soldate ontplooi het tydens die duur van die Grensoorlog gedurende 1976 tot 1989. Hierdie syfer van teenwoordig 'n groot aantal jong Suid-Afrikaners wie verpligte militêre diens verrig het. Meer lig word in die artikel gewerp oor die SAW se vroeë betrokkenheid by die stryd wat tot onafhanklikheid van Namibië gelei het. Jaarliks word elke dag Namibië gevier. Dit word algemeen aanvaar dat dit die begin van die Grensoorlog was, toe SAW ondersteunde mag, SWAPO basis in die noordweste van Namibië te Umlambashe aangeval het op 26 Augustus 1966. Daarna was SWAPO se basisse tot Zambië en Angola beperk, wat as afspringplekke gedien het om sagte teikens in Namibië aan te val. Uit bronne in die argiewe wat voorheen onbekend was, vir die publiek kon waardevolle inligting gevind word oor Suid-Afrika se eerste buitelandse gevegte in die Grensoorlog, wat 3 jaar later op 26 Augustus 1969 plaasgevind het. Tydens hierdie gevegte het 'n paar manne wat uit lede van die lugmag en die Wetsuitse polisie bestaan het, met 'n groep van SWAPO slaags geraak. Daar sou geen woord oor daardie dagse gebeure gerep word as die Zambiese regering nie die Suid-Afrikaners beskuldig het van 'n ongewenste grenskending nie. Nou hoe die SAW betrokke geraak by hierdie geveg en die aanleiding daartoe, so nadat Suid-Afrika in 1961 'n republiek geword het, was die vroeë SAW maar 'n skadebeeld van die meer doeltreffende SAW wat teen 1987 en 88 in die finale grootskaalse gevegte in die Angolese weermag betrokke geraak het. Hierdie verhaal in 1969 speel af gedurende 'n tydperk toe die noorde van Namibië nog vir die Suid-Afrikaners grootliks onbekend was. Die grens, wat so min of meer oor 'n afstand van 1500 km strek, was maar slegs deur 'n skrale polisiemag van 260 lede gerapporteer. Hulle het hoofsaaklik gefokus op algemene take soos wetstoepassing en misdaadvoorkoming. Die destydse hoof van die Suid-Afrikaanse weermag, kommandant-generaal Rudolf Hiemstra, hy was die hoof van April 1966 tot Maart 1972, het aangekondig dat die grensgebied wat Namibië met die noordelike buurstate deel, amptelik as die een militêre gebied bekend sou staan. Dit was op 14 April 1969 as die sogenaamde operasionele gebied gedoop. Die eerste bevelvoerder van een militêre gebied was toe kolonel De Wet Roos gewees. So Angola was in die vroeë jare 60s tot ongeveer in 75 onder Portugal se bewind gewees. Groot gebiede van Suidoos-Angola was beheer deur die 3 gorilla groepe wat hoofsaaklik uit Zambië uit geopereer het, naamlik die MPLA, UNITA en SWAPO. Ten aanskoue van die Suid-Afrikaners het die Portugese stelselmatig die gewapende stryd in Angola begin verloor. Die Suid-Afrikaners was aanvanklik onwillig om teikens buite Namibië aan te val. Daar was 'n regsmening verkry wat die mening uitgespreek het dat enige aggressie of aanvalle buite die landsgrense onder sekere omstandighede 'n oortreding van internasionale reg sal wees, omdat dit op aggressie teen 'n soewereine staat sou neerkom. Vir bykans 'n dekade het die Suid-Afrikaanse weermag meestal gehou by hierdie streng reëls. So hoe het Suid-Afrika se eerste buitelandse aanval dan in teenstryd met hierdie reëls teen SWAPO plaasgevind? Daar was 2 helikoptervlieëniers wie lede was van die Suid-Afrikaanse lugmag, naamlik luitenant Chris Hartzenberg, hy was by aftrede brigadier-generaal in die lugmag, luitenant Dan RW, afgetree as 'n kolonel. Hulle het opdrag van 'n kaptein Loukie Malan. Nou, hy was by aftrede 'n luitenant-generaal in die Suid-Afrikaanse polisie. Kaptein Malan, die destydse hoof van die Suid-Afrikaanse veiligheidspolisie by Katima Mulilo in die Caprivi, het 'n verkenningsvlug oor die Zambezi rivier sy uitvoering versoek. Dit het gevolg op inligting oor 'n moontlike gorilla groep wat wild gejaag het in die omgewing van Suidoos-Angola. Niks hiervan was aanvanklik aan die SAW se hoërgesag rapporteer nie. Hartzenberg het terug by sy hoofkwartier by Rundu 'n verslag gelewer oor 'n insident wat plaasgevind het toe 2 Suid-Afrikaanse helikopters, waarvan hy die een linier was, op 26 Augustus 1969 oor 'n moerasagtige gebied van die Kwando rivier, so in die middel van die Caprivi, gevlieg het. Saam met die lugmagvlieëniers was 'n boordtegnisie en aan boord was 4 lede van die destydse veiligheidspolisie, dis die polisie wat nie uniform gedra het nie, onder aanvoering van kaptein Loukie Malan. Onder hom het gedien luitenant Jonathan de Pre, konstabel Jansen, sy naam is my onbekend, en 'n konstabel Michael Morris. Hy was later bekend outeur van verskeie boeke oor terrorisme. Hulle was ook vergesel gewees deur 'n swart gis. So om 9:15 die oggend, onderweg na 'n polisiepos, Sefuma, noord van die Kongola in Caprivi, teen aan die Angolese en Zambiese grens met Namibië, het hulle onverwags in die Luboyo-omgewing in Oos-Caprivi 'n groep van ongeveer 30 gewapende gorilla-vegters op 'n skiereiland teenoor die Kwando rivier gewaar, wat duidelik gewapend was met minstens 2 outomatiese masjiengewere. Hierdie kamp was maar skraal, maar het 'n paar tente en hutte bestaan. Nadat die 4 veiligheidspolisielede by die basis afgelaai was, het die helikopters ondersteuning gebied deur in sirkelbewegings bo die basis te vlieg. Nadat die vegters helikopters gewaar het, het 'n vuurgeveg plaasgevind. Tydens hierdie gebeure is een van die vegters, die 'n wapen by hom gehad het, hom na 'n sluitsloop gehaas om heel moontlik ammunisie aanvulling te doen. Die polisiemanne bevind hulle toe in 'n oop area wat hulle aan veranderlike geweervuur blootgestel het. Gelukkig is hulle benaarde omstandighede verlig toe hulle welkome ondersteuning van 'n boordtegnisie ontvang het, wie met sy 9mm handwapen vanuit die helikopter op die vegters begin losbrand het. Een van die vegters het probeer wegkom deur 'n digte bosskuiling te soek terwyl daar aan op hom geskiet was. Toe hy weer tevoorskyn kom, het hy sy hande omhoog gehou omrede hy gewond was. Die res van die groep het die aftof geblaas en deur die digte bosse hulle ontwyk en gevlug. Maar daarna het 'n paar goed gevolg. Die helikopters het die polisiemanne en 'n gebuite masjiengeweer op die toneel agtergelaat en teruggetrek na Sefuma, omrede hulle oorlaai was, volgens die verslag, en hulle reeds laag op brandstof was. Die gewonde vegter is afgevoer na Sefuma en later die dag, omtrent 3 uur, na Katima Mulilo, waar hy noodsaaklike mediese behandeling ontvang het vir sy wonde. Terug by Sefuma het die helikoptervlieëniers weer 8 polisiemanne opgelaai en teruggekeer na die vyandellike basis om verdere versterkings te bied. Die helikopters het daarna vertrek na Luena, 'n nageleë Portugese weermagpos noord van die grens in Angola, om bystand van die Portugese weermag te versoek om 'n opvolgoperasie te loods. Hierdie die Portugese offisiere hulle misnoot teen die polisie se roekelose optrede uitgespreek, eenvoudig geweier om betrokke te raak by die gevegte. Die helikopters het teruggekeer en op 'n plek omtrent 16 km noord van Luena was nog 'n gewapende groep vegters wat op 2 bootjies op 'n rivier gevaar het opgemerk. Die vegters het vars vleis aan boord gehad wat 'n aanleiding gee dat hulle eintlik maar jagters was wat kos bymekaar gemaak het in die omgewing. Hulle het met 'n outomatiese geweer AK-47 op die helikopters losgebrand. Luitenant de Pre en die boortegnikus het vanuit die lug teruggeskiet, maar hulle het nie sukses behaal nie en moes toe verder vertrek na die vyandelike basis. Daar het hulle 'n paar polisiemanne aan boord na Sefima teruggekeer om weer herbankering te doen. So die insident het 'n bietjie aandag getrek en daar toe nog 'n verslag gevolg op 10 September wat deur majoor Niemann opgestel was. Kort na die terugkeer van die vyandelike basis om versterkings te lewer. Hy sê in die verslag van 10 September dat hulle op 'n bynes van 48 vegters afgekom het. Hy maak ook as 'n verslag dat daar was op genoeg ammunisie afgekom om die hele Katimo Molilo 10 maal die lug in op te blaas. Sy verslag brei uit oor hoe nog 'n kontak met 'n groep vegters plaasgevind het, waar tydens 4 vegters doodgeskiet was. Na die polisie met die versterkings by die vyandelike basis aangekom het, sou die vegters se liggame reeds verwyder gewees het. Dit is waarskynlik dat hierdie vegters tydens die eerste kontak gesneuwel het. Die aantal soldate wat gesneuwel het, sou ook bepaal kon word aan die hand van merke soos liggaamsposisies en bloedvlekke wat op die grond waarneembaar was. So, hoekom die geveg in Zambië? As gevolg van 'n navigasiefout wat deur die vlieëniers gemaak is, was die vyandelike basis wat hulle aangeval het, toe buite die Suid-Afrikaanse weermag geleë. Die gids wat hulle vergesel het nie opgelet dat hulle die grens oorgesteek het nie, omdat die helikopters baie laag oor die gebied gevlieg het. Nou, as gevolg van die insident, het Brigadier Dillon kort daarna sy misnoë uitgespreek deur die veiligheidspolisie, omdat hulle nie goedkeuring gehad het om 'n offensiewe optrede op Zambiese grondgebied teen 'n vyandelike mag te neem. Tydens ondervraging het die gewonde vegter sy ware identiteit uiteindelik onthul. Daartydens het erken dat hy was 'n bekende Capriviaanse lid van die SWAPO. Hy het 18 maande voor die voorval Namibië verlaat om opleiding te kry en dat hy bevestig het dat die korrekte syfer SWAPO's wat in die basis was tydens die aanval op 38 soldate neergekom het. Daarna was verskeie Zambiese radioberigte onderskep dat die Zambiese regering oor die ongeoorloofde grenskending beswaar gemaak het. Daar kon toe deur middel van 'n diplomatieke kanale verder met die voorval gehandel word.
Yes, my name is Chris Hartzenberg. At that time, in August 1969, I was a lieutenant in the South African Air Force, based at Katimo Molilo, helicopter pilot, LO-83, and we as Air Force people at that stage were under the command of the South African Police Service. And then
my name is Don Nierwe, also known as Don. I was there as second lieutenant at that time, also flying LO-3 helicopters.
No.
At this stage, I'm retired as a brigadier general.
Yeah, when they first introduced the package deals, I took a package in 2000, left the Air Force, and subsequently been flying in the private sector till this morning.
Just before the 26th of August, the two of us were having a good night's bit of get together with the security police guys in the pub, and we were discussing the security situation just across the border from Katimo Molilo. And one thing led to another, and we started a planning process, very short planning process, said that they have an informer who knows exactly what the location of a terrorist camp is just over the border. So we decided the next morning, very early, we will leave. Captain Malon was the OC at that stage of the security police. Lieutenant de Pre, Jonathan de Pre, was his second in command. Then there was Constable Michael Morris, and I forget the name of the last person. Don, can you perhaps remember?
Sorry, Leo. I was only the shotgun driver.
Yeah. Well, the next morning, very, very early, we left. There was no planning done by the legal CCAA body. Remember, we were under the command of the South African police, not the South African security police. So in a sense, we left illegally with these 4 security police gentlemen on board. We flew down to the Kwanda River. We landed. We picked up this informer. It was arranged previously. And he climbed into my helicopter, and the 2 of us then took off at the Kwanda River for the Tur camp. There were 2 Alouettes. Don was commanding the one, myself the other one. We had Captain Loki Malone, Lieutenant Jonathan de Preer, in my chopper. Michael Morris was in your chopper, is that right, Don?
And the other one, yeah.
And the other guy?
Yeah.
And the informer was sitting in the chair between me and my flight engineer in the Alouette. And because these guys are not used to flying, we realized that it wouldn't help to climb up and tell them to show us where the terrorist camp is. They need to view view everything from ground level. So we proceeded across the river, very, very low. And this guy had to show us left here, right there. It's very swampy, that area. So at that height, it is difficult to know whether you are in Zambia, whether you're in Angola. Yeah, we were in the swamps, and we just followed the directions of this guy until he told us. He showed us over here. We did a quick turn. I went in first, followed by Don. Well, we landed where the guy told us where to land, not seeing anything. But as we landed, I saw that there were some ammunition boxes in the bushes. In fact, our HF aerials were broken off in the landing process against these boxes. Because we were expecting some form of enemy action. At that stage, the adrenaline was really pumping by now. Our passengers deplaned very fast. We took off equally fast, just to minimize our exposure to possible enemy fire. As we took off, we suddenly saw a man running through the bush away from us, obviously trying to get away from us. I don't know whether he was in the bush where we landed, but it looked like it. And he was really trying to get away from us. He wasn't, at that stage we saw that he was wearing civilian clothes, but from past experience we realized that these guys, these Turs, didn't always don uniforms. So that didn't deter us. We looked and saw that it didn't look as though he was carrying a rifle. And due to the dense bush, we couldn't see whether he was carrying a pistol either. However, what was clear to us was that this guy, or at least our ground forces, hadn't spotted him. And he was really trying to flee the scene. To us, this was a terrorist trying to get away from the camp. Our heli wasn't armed, and so what we did was our flight engineer, Fires van Vuren, he pulled his 9mm pistol and it started shooting at this guy through the little window on the door of the Alouette from the left front seat. That bush was very dense, and so he had a bit of a problem doing this. Eventually, he got the guy and he shot him. We picked him up into my chopper, and we realized that at that stage there was also some radio chatter with our people that we dropped. Some radio chatter, they had some problem which we can't recall at this stage. But anyway, we knew that we had to get some reinforcements. We took this wounded guy with us to Sefuma police camp nearby in the Caprivi. We got there, offloaded the Tur, as we thought. And we spoke to the commander there. He said it's not an authorized op. He knows nothing about this. He's not security police. He's uniformed police, and he couldn't help us. We realized in that case, what else could we do? We knew there was a Portuguese camp not too far up the river, the Quando River, north. Proceeded there, and as we got there, we saw the Nor Atlas transport aircraft on the ground, lots of troops on the runway. We landed, got out, spoke to the officer commanding there, who was a major. He was all dressed up in his full uniform. We couldn't understand this. We spoke to him and said, we really need emergency assistance from his troops straight away. He just laughed and said, sorry, pal, we know nothing about this. We are on our way back to Metropoli. It's the end of our tour in Angola. So there was nothing doing. There was no support coming from them. Got into the choppers, set sail again back home. We climbed for altitude. We were sitting at about 1,500 feet over the Quando River, going south back towards the Tur camp, which we haven't seen at that stage, but we knew where we dropped our security police force people that morning. And as we approached that area, we saw Watu, which is a dugout canoe, crossing from the west side to the east side. In other words, from the Angolan side into Zambian territory. But it looked like a very peaceful scenario. Locals moving across the river as they normally do. But as we got closer, we saw this guy was really going for it, rowing like mad in a great rush. So this looked suspect. We lost altitude fairly quickly, straight for him. He reached the banks of the river. At the same time we got to the spot, we saw the Watu was loaded with lots of meat, and underneath the meat he got hold of the rifle and took the rifle, jumped off, and we went into the hover close to him. At that stage we came into the hover, just sort of 20 feet above this guy, and he was aiming at the chopper, but Jonathan de Pre sitting in the back of our chopper. He had his door open, his R1 to his shoulder, and he was trying to shoot back. And then all of a sudden his rifle jammed, and he shouted for me to move off. And that's when we moved off. We realized that this whole operation wasn't going to work. And basically that's when we picked them up. We moved back to Katima. And basically that was the end of the operation. But Don, I don't know if you have anything else that I perhaps missed.
Yeah. Yes, sir. I think that covers it about it.
We saw absolutely nothing. But now I must say that if I say we saw nothing, we saw the ammo boxes in the bushes, but they were so well hidden and camouflaged that we were right on top of them. That's why we broke the aerials off before we saw it. So with the denseness of the bush, the Tur camp could have been 30, 40 yards away from us, and we wouldn't see it. So we actually saw no camp. We saw no Turs, no soldiers, except for this one informer, which we shot. Yeah, I can't even remember that this was about, let's say it's an hour or two after we started out. I can't even remember. I can't recall that we ever thought about those, because we also had to get this wounded Tur back to Katima Mulilo as well. See, basically we were the chopper drivers. We were the taxi drivers. We weren't privy to any discussions or anything afterwards. We never knew what he said. We never saw him after that. I don't know what happened outside Katima. All I know was that The Air Force had their own Board of Inquiry, led by Colonel Tank Odendaal. He flew to Katima, and we gave him our story. And that's the end of it. 2 junior lieutenants doing a job as we saw fit, and the rest was the problem of the people
A
hiring.
couple of days after the so-called incident, my tour was finished and I returned to the Republic on the Wednesday. When I landed, when we landed at Waterkliffs, somebody called my name over the intercom system, and there was a message for me to report at the Air Force Base Swartkop early next morning, where we boarded the Dakota, myself, and Colonel Tank Odendaal, and he was, as far as I could recall, he was then appointed the president of the Board of Inquiry. So there was a Board of Inquiry instituted, and we flew back to Katima, where the board was met. Yeah, basically what we told you now, we told them. And until I left the Air Force, that was the last that I heard of it. So what you must remember is that the Caprivi at that stage was part of the Transvaal province of South Africa, and all administration police work was the responsibility of the Transvaal provincial government. Because there were insurgency operations in then Rhodesia and also in Angola, I think that the powers that be decided that to give mobility to the police force in the Caprivi would be to employ some sort of helicopter support, because the roads were impassable, especially during the rainy season. They had a contingency at the Impalele Island to the eastern part of the Caprivi. Half of that was a swamp area. So 9 times out of 10 of the best part of the year, you can only get there by air. I think that's what the helicopters were doing there, is to provide mobility to the South African police.
Nou ja, seker ongeveer 20 jaar later het die oorlog uitgebrei en geëskaleer. Die grensoorlog het met die verloop van tyd meer en meer betrokkenheid vereis. Dit is ironies dat 2 dekades later van die grootste landsgevegte van die Koue Oorlog in ongeveer dieselfde gebied, noord van die Caprivi, soos wat hier beskryf word, plaasgevind het. Nou die grensoorlog het uiteindelik op 8 Augustus 1988 eers tot 'n einde gekom, nadat 'n onderhandelingsskikking deur die sterkende partye aanvaar was. Dit is my storie.